Have you ever wondered why the same kind of toxic people keep showing up in your life, like you're a magnet for chaos? No matter where you go, they somehow find you, like drama has your address saved. You try to set boundaries, avoid the arguments, even tell yourself to stay calm, but it keeps happening. And after every interaction, you're left emotionally drained, second-guessing yourself, questioning your own peace. But what if the real shift doesn't start with them? What if the real change begins with what you allow? Some people walk through life completely untouched by toxic energy. Not because they fight harder, or cut more people off, but because they've changed something within. They've tuned themselves to a different frequency, one that drama can't even detect. It's like they've become invisible to chaos. That transformation doesn't announce itself with a big, loud moment. There are no fireworks, no dramatic declarations. It begins in silence. In the nervous system, in the slow, steady mastery of the self. It begins the moment you decide to stop reacting to every spark that tries to light your emotional fuse. In this video, we'll explore the profound, yet quiet power of Stoic wisdom, the kind that teaches you not to fight the storm, but to become the calm. If you're tired of the same patterns, the same emotional traps, and the same people pulling you into battles that aren't yours, then stay with me. Because what you're about to hear might just be the shift you didn't know you were waiting for. And if you're serious about reclaiming your peace, your inner stillness, go ahead and hit subscribe, like the video, and share it with someone who needs this too. Let's rebuild from the inside out. Let's begin with the first insight. The internal shift that breaks the cycle. There comes a moment, a quiet, almost invisible turning point, when you realize that the problem isn't just the people who keep hurting you. It's the part of you that keeps leaving the door open for them to walk in. A lot of people think boundaries are loud. That you have to shout, confront, or burn bridges to prove your worth. But real boundaries? They don't begin with noise. They begin with clarity. True boundaries are built not in anger, but in awareness. They don't need to be announced, they're felt. They're the invisible line you stop crossing when you no longer betray yourself just to keep the peace. And this is where Stoic philosophy becomes your anchor. Long before psychology gave it a name, the Stoics lived it. They understood that your outer world mirrors the inner one. Marcus Aurelius didn't talk about revenge, he talked about stability. Epictetus didn't teach us to control others, he showed us how to master ourselves. Because when your nervous system is in chaos, you attract chaos. But when you become calm, steady, and unmoved, the storms no longer find you. And that's where we begin. But the shift doesn't stop here. In the next part, we'll look deeper into how your emotional patterns shape your reality, and how Stoic wisdom gives you the tools to break free from toxic cycles, for good. And once you stop inviting chaos in, something begins to shift. Not out loud, not overnight, but within. When you learn how to regulate your nervous system, to return to calm, even when someone's pushing your buttons, everything changes. Think about that one friend, or coworker. You know the one. The person who somehow always pulls you into their latest drama. It's like clockwork. The moment they sense even the slightest discomfort in you, they lean in harder. Not necessarily because they're malicious, but because, over time, they've learned something about you. They've learned that your energy is available. That your attention is easy to grab. That your emotional presence is something they can count on. That your silence is just a pause, not a boundary. They feed off your reactions, your explanations, your need to be seen and understood. They don't just manipulate your kindness, they depend on your fear of leaving without closure. That hesitation, that desire to exit every situation the right way, that's the door they slip through. But here's where the transformation begins. When you meet chaos with stillness, when you stop rising to the bait, something remarkable happens. They pause. They hesitate. Because suddenly, their tactics don't work. You're no longer reacting the way you used to. You're not offering your emotional energy up like an open tab. You're not trying to earn peace by managing their dysfunction. You've shifted. And because you've changed what you respond to, you've changed what you attract. This isn't just a philosophical concept. It's biological. When your nervous system learns that safety doesn't come from people-pleasing or over-explaining, but from standing firmly in your truth, you begin to broadcast something entirely different. You radiate calm. You don't have to declare your boundaries, you embody them. People feel that. And not everyone will like it. Some will drift away. Others will disappear entirely. But that's not rejection. That's alignment. Because the version of you that once tolerated emotional chaos, that version no longer exists. This shift is profound. It's powerful. It's deeply stoic. You stop asking, why do these people keep showing up in my life? And you start asking, what part of me kept the door open? That one question. It changes everything. It moves you from helplessness to power. From being reactive, to being sovereign. From surviving, to consciously choosing what belongs in your space. And in that quiet, rooted place of inner strength, you don't just escape toxic patterns. You outgrow them. Now here's something even deeper to consider. What you focus on, you become. It's a tough truth, one we often ignore. But both Stoic philosophy and neuroscience say the same thing. Your attention isn't passive. It's not neutral. It's a force. An amplifier. Whatever you feed with your thoughts, you reinforce. And the brain? It adapts. It rewires itself based on repetition, a process called neuroplasticity. Seneca said it best, a distracted mind is a lost mind. Pulled in every direction except toward its own center. And that brings us to a turning point. A moment of clarity about where your energy goes next. You remember what we said before, your attention is not neutral. It shapes your reality. So think about this. If you spend your days replaying what someone said, analyzing their silence, bracing for the next passive-aggressive jab, you're not just stressed, you're conditioning your brain to live in that chaos. You're normalizing instability. Over time, your nervous system adapts to survive, not to thrive. It begins to expect conflict, even in peaceful rooms. You start scanning every face for tension. Every silence feels like danger. And slowly, you start mistaking survival for connection. But let's be clear, this isn't weakness. This is conditioning. Because the brain doesn't care about what's fair. It cares about what's familiar. And dysfunction, when repeated, becomes home. Even if it hurts. But here's where your power begins. The Stoics taught that real freedom doesn't begin out there, it starts here, with your focus. What you mentally nourish becomes the environment you emotionally live in. So when you stop feeding the dysfunction. When you stop replaying old fights in your head. Stop scrolling through their social media for clues. Stop offering space in your mind to people who never earned peace with you. You begin a transformation. Not a dramatic one. Not something you'll post about. But a quiet, grounded shift in your psychology. Instead of obsessing over someone else's behavior, you start looking inward. You return to your breath. Your morning rituals. Your values. Your body. Your grounding. You stop living in reaction. You begin living in alignment. That's coherence, when your thoughts, your values, and your actions finally sync. You stop falling into emotional traps. You begin responding with clarity. You choose what deserves your energy, and what doesn't. And the things that once pulled you down, they start to fall away. Not because you pushed them, but because they no longer stick. The people who once triggered you don't get the same version of you anymore. They feel the change. Not because you've become cold, but because you've become clear. You've stopped playing the game they relied on to stay relevant in your life. There's no reward for manipulation. No fuel left for chaos. And that's when something powerful happens. Your nervous system settles. You stop trying to fix what was never yours to carry. You stop apologizing for choosing peace. And for the first time in a long time, you begin to feel what real freedom tastes like. Not the kind you need to prove to others, but the kind that hums quietly beneath your skin, steady, grounded, untouchable. So let me ask you, where has your attention been living lately? Drop a comment, let's talk about it. And in the next part, we'll look at one of the most misunderstood forms of strength, the ability to stay silent, when silence speaks louder than words. So ask yourself, are you feeding peace? Or are you keeping chaos alive without even realizing it? 3. Let silence shield your strength. In a world that glorifies hot takes, instant replies, and constant noise, silence can seem like a weakness. Maybe even a failure. We've been taught that if you don't respond immediately, if you don't defend yourself, prove your point, or speak up in the heat of the moment, you're somehow passive, or worse, complicit. But that belief? It's a trap. Because when chosen with intention, silence isn't avoidance, it's mastery. The Stoics knew this long before the science caught up. They understood that true power doesn't come from matching energy, but from mastering the space between stimulus and response. That tiny space, the pause before you react, is where strength is built. Not by firing back. Not by shouting louder. But by observing. By staying anchored in yourself. Think about what happens when your body senses a threat. Your heart races. Your breath shortens. Your muscles tense, and your thinking narrows. This is your fight or flight response, an ancient survival instinct. And in moments of emotional tension, it often takes the wheel. You don't think, you react. You blurt out words you didn't mean, lash out, retreat, or crumble. Not because you're weak, but because your nervous system thinks you're under attack. The problem? Often, there's no battlefield. Just someone's toxic energy, trying to pull you in. And every time you rise to the bait, you reinforce the cycle. You give your peace away to prove a point that never needed proving. But something shifts when you start choosing silence. You pause. You feel the emotional wave rising, and you let it pass. You don't explain your worth. You don't defend your every move. You let your stillness do the talking. That moment, that powerful non-reaction, resets everything. Because when you stop performing for their dysfunction, you stop feeding it. You start retraining your nervous system to stay calm in moments that once triggered you. And over time, silence stops feeling like suppression. It becomes something stronger, a shield. A boundary that doesn't require explanation, only presence. One that toxic people feel, even if you say nothing. Because these people, they thrive on reactions. They poke, they escalate, they provoke, not to connect with you, but to control the room. But when your energy doesn't flinch, when you give them nothing to hold on to, when you no longer dance to their dysfunction, they lose their grip. And you reclaim your ground. In the next part, we'll explore what it means to walk away without guilt, and why letting go can be one of the most courageous acts of self-respect you'll ever make. And that's where your power truly lies. Not in yelling louder. Not in trying to win the argument. But in becoming unavailable for emotional manipulation. When you refuse to be baited, when you don't offer your energy so easily, you reclaim control. And over time, that quiet restraint rewires everything. It changes how others approach you. More importantly, it changes how you experience yourself. You begin moving from reactivity to sovereignty. As Marcus Aurelius once wrote, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. When your silence becomes that strength, when you no longer react to every push or prod, no chaos can touch you. 4. When you align, chaos can't stay. Here's a quiet truth that rarely makes headlines, but it governs everything. Your energy enters the room before you do. Even when you're silent, you're broadcasting, through your breath, your posture, your presence, the tension you carry in your shoulders. People don't just hear your words. They feel who you are. And when your internal state is disorganized, anxious, or restless, that chaos doesn't stay hidden. It radiates. Not in some mystical way, but in a biological one. Neuroscience shows us that we're wired with mirror neurons, tiny mechanisms in the brain that attune us to the emotional states of others. We subconsciously mirror the energy we're around. So if you're vibrating with insecurity, if you're walking around with unresolved tension, people around you feel that, even if they don't know why. And guess who notices it the most? The people who thrive on chaos. The manipulators. The emotional agitators. The ones whose nervous systems are wired for dysfunction. Chaos seeks out chaos. It's like tuning forks vibrating at the same frequency, they find each other. Take the example of Mike Tyson. Not the heavyweight champion in his prime, but the younger version, before discipline anchored him. In his early years, Tyson was surrounded by instability, trauma, and raw emotional volatility. He carried that chaos, into the ring, into his relationships, into his identity. It wasn't just his punches that invited conflict. It was his unregulated energy, loud, reactive, and exposed. But everything began to shift when he slowed down. When he started training not just his body, but his mind. When he began mastering his impulses, recalibrating his nervous system. And when his inner state changed, so did his outer world. The chaos faded. And the people and situations he attracted started to change, too. The Stoics understood this long before science explained it. They taught us to live in harmony, not just with nature, but with our own nature. That means cultivating inner order, so the external world no longer holds power over us. Because when your nervous system is calm, your presence becomes steady. Not because you're pretending, but because you've earned that calm. Through breath, through discipline, through solitude, and through self-respect. And from that place, something remarkable begins to happen. Next, we'll dive into how this steady presence doesn't just protect your peace, it attracts the right kind of life. One built not on survival, but intention. That inner alignment you've been building, it becomes an invisible armor. The people who once fed off your instability, they find no weakness to exploit. The ones who thrived on your emotional reactions, they're left with silence. Not because you announced some grand boundary, but because you've become unavailable to the chaos. There's nothing left in you that resonates with dysfunction. And here's the beauty of it. This isn't just about keeping toxicity out. It's about attracting differently. When you live in alignment, when your values, emotions, and actions begin to flow as one, you don't have to chase peace anymore. You are peace. And peace doesn't beg for attention. It draws people who recognize and reflect that same grounded stability. As Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Master the internal, and the external begins to shift. Not by force, but by frequency. And if these insights are resonating with you, I want to hear from you. Drop a "yes" in the comments below. Let's grow this conversation, together. 5. Protect your lane. Preserve your power. There's a quiet strength in staying in your own lane, especially in a world constantly tempting you to leave it. You're nudged to get involved in things that don't belong to you. To fix other people's messes. To read into their moods. To earn their approval. To interpret their silence. But all of that, it drains your energy. It spreads your attention so thin that when you finally return to yourself, there's nothing left to give. The Stoics knew better. They taught that true power is internal. Your thoughts. Your choices. Your responses. Those are yours to master. Everything else? Not your job. And now, neuroscience is backing that wisdom with biology. Your brain only has so much focus in a day, a finite amount of clarity, willpower, and emotional stamina. And every time you spend it decoding someone's passive-aggressive tone, overthinking why a friend didn't text back, or wondering if your presence is enough for someone who doesn't value it, you're leaking power, not protecting it. It's like trying to run a marathon, after giving all your fuel to someone else's sprint. You won't notice the damage right away. But slowly, it builds. You start to feel reactive, anxious, scattered, pulled in 10 different directions, and none of them are your own. But here's where it shifts. The question isn't, why are they doing this to me? It becomes, why am I still giving this my focus? In the next part, we'll break down how to reclaim that focus, and how redirecting your attention may be the most radical form of self-respect you'll ever practice. That shift? It's subtle. But it changes everything. Because when you stop feeding dysfunction with your attention, it starts to starve. And when you bring that attention back, to your own work, your own peace, your own growth, your brain rewards you for it. You feel a little sharper. A little more grounded. A little more you. You begin to associate peace, not with avoidance or isolation, but with presence. With discipline. With a calm that isn't fragile, but earned. And that's the turning point. Because the pull of chaos, it stops feeling addictive. It no longer gives you that false sense of purpose. It just feels heavy. Think back to a time someone tried to drag you into a conflict, something that wasn't even yours. Maybe it happened at work. Or during a tense family moment. The pressure to jump in felt immediate. Like if you didn't say something, you'd be seen as passive. Or worse, uncaring. But instead, you held your ground. You chose silence. Not from fear, but from clarity. And when you walked away, you felt lighter. That's what it means to protect your lane. You don't abandon others. You just stop abandoning yourself. Psychologically, this is where something powerful kicks in. Selective attention. Your brain starts learning what no longer matters. You stop noticing the jabs. You stop hearing the bait. You become so focused on building your own life, your own peace, that the noise doesn't even reach you. That's not you being cold. That's you finally being clear. So here's the real question. What part of your life are you still giving away to things that don't belong to you? Drop your thoughts in the comments, let's talk about it. Now let's go deeper. Let's talk about what it truly looks like to stay rooted in your own lane. 5. Protect your lane. Preserve your power. Yes, this point matters that much. Because we live in a world that constantly tempts you to leave your lane. You're encouraged to chase drama. To get involved in conflicts that aren't yours. To read into other people's moods, their silence, their approval, or lack of it. But every time you do, you scatter your energy. Your focus becomes fragmented. Your clarity drains. And by the time you return to yourself, there's nothing left to build with. The Stoics saw this clearly. They didn't waste time chasing what wasn't theirs to carry. They knew the real work, the real power, is internal. Your thoughts. Your choices. Your reactions. That's your domain. Everything else. Not your responsibility. Modern neuroscience confirms what the Stoics lived by. Your brain only has so much focus, clarity, and emotional strength in a day. And every time you spend it decoding passive-aggressive comments. Overanalyzing someone's silence. Wondering what you did wrong in a space that never felt safe. You're burning fuel that was meant for your purpose, not their chaos. In the next part, we'll explore the final principle. How to protect your energy like a sacred resource and why doing less often creates more. Think back to a time when you were constantly walking on eggshells, anticipating someone else's mood. Maybe it was a partner, a parent, a colleague. You became an emotional contortionist, bending yourself in every direction just to keep the peace. To keep the room calm. To keep them happy. It felt necessary. It felt like survival. But over time, it becomes your normal. Your nervous system stops seeking peace. Instead, it starts preparing for threat. You're not living, you're scanning. Constantly reading the room. Bracing for impact. Waiting for the shift. And that's where Stoicism offers a powerful alternative. It teaches that peace isn't something you earn by suffering. It's not a reward for endurance. It's a discipline. A choice made with clarity. And protecting your mental space. That's not selfish, it's strategic. Because every time you walk into a storm that doesn't belong to you, you surrender the calm that does. The real shift begins when you stop looking for safety in other people's approval. When you realize that alignment, between your values, your choices, and your energy, is a stronger foundation than any relationship built on emotional sacrifice. And then, without warning, things begin to feel different. The arguments you once felt obligated to explain. The dysfunction you used to absorb. The need to be understood at all costs. All of it starts to feel heavy. You don't push people away with force. You simply stop handing them the version of you they expect. Your absence becomes your boundary. Your stillness becomes your answer. You no longer argue to be heard. You no longer perform peace just to avoid tension. You start to live it. Quietly. Intentionally. Because as the Stoics taught, you don't control what happens out there. But you always control your response. And when that response is shaped by inner order, everything changes. The chaos may still surround you. But it no longer shakes you. You've become immune, not through hardening, but through refinement. As Seneca wrote, "He is most powerful who has power over himself." And when you live by that, you stop giving your life away to what doesn't deserve you. Because peace, true peace, isn't passive. It's earned. And once you've earned it, you don't give it away easily. Because anything that costs your peace is simply too expensive. 7. Transform quietly. Rise invisibly. Real transformation. It's not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't beg to be seen. It happens in silence. Behind the scenes. In the private corners of your life where no one is watching. Because the kind of growth that reshapes your core, it doesn't come with applause. It comes with distance. Distance. Not to isolate, but to realign. Distance from distractions. Distance from the version of you that was always performing. Always pleasing. Always stretching to be enough. For people who quietly benefited from your chaos. Neuroscience has a word for this shift, neuroplasticity. The brain's ability to rewire itself. Through repetition, through intention. But here's what most people forget. That rewiring, it can't happen in noise. It needs space. It needs stillness. And to the Stoics, stillness wasn't escape. It was preparation. It was the quiet place where character is formed. Where the next version of you is forged, not in public, but in peace. Think about someone like Keanu Reeves. He's become a kind of cultural mystery, not for how loud he is, but for how deeply grounded, how impossibly quiet he remains, even in the face of massive fame. His life? It hasn't been without heartbreak. But he never performed his healing. He didn't brand it. He disappeared. He rebuilt privately. And then he returned, not with a speech, but with presence. That's what Stoicism asks of you. Not to vanish forever. but to retreat long enough for the real you to take root. The danger most people face during transformation. Exposure too early. When change is still forming, still delicate, the urge to prove you're different can become the very thing that pulls you backward. Maybe you start posting about your peace. Declaring your boundaries. Explaining your new mindset to people who never respected the old one. And in doing that, you leave the door open. For criticism. For judgment. For manipulation wrapped in familiarity. The Stoics warned against this. They believed. Master yourself first. Then face the world. Because if you're still looking for approval, the change hasn't fully landed. During this fragile phase, silence isn't just a strategy. It's a vow. A commitment to protect what is still becoming real. You start to notice who tries to pull you back. Not always out of cruelty. Sometimes simply because your growth threatens their comfort. They test you, not with conflict, but with familiarity. Old phrases. Old habits. Subtle emotional hooks, designed to see. Will the old version of you show up? But when your silence holds. When you don't explain, don't react, don't return. You gain ground. And something begins to settle. You walk differently. You respond slower. You stop proving. You just are. And the people who once thrived on your instability, they can't reach you anymore. Not because you built walls, but because you built depth. And that depth, it becomes your sanctuary. A space only the disciplined can truly feel. Not everyone will understand it. But they were never meant to. And if these insights have resonated with you, let me know. Drop a simple yes in the comments. Your thoughts matter, and I'd love to hear where you are on this path. 8. Speak less. Show more. There comes a moment in your growth when words just stop mattering. Because talk is easy. But proof is what counts. You realize that speaking about peace, about boundaries, about change, means nothing. If your life doesn't reflect it in quiet, consistent, deliberate ways. And no, that's not cynicism. That's neuroscience. Your brain is wired to detect what's real and filter out what's just noise. It's called salience detection. The mental mechanism that helps us sift through endless input and decide what's meaningful, what's just distraction. And it applies to more than just attention. It's how people perceive you. Loud declarations. They lose weight if they're not backed by action. Eventually, people stop listening to what you say you'll become. And start responding to what you've actually become. There's gravity in consistency. In showing up, again and again, without needing applause. Without announcing every step. Take someone like J. Cole. He doesn't flood the internet with promises or self-promotion. He disappears. He works. And when he returns, his work speaks for itself. No explanation needed. That's what real Stoic alignment looks like. Not disappearing out of bitterness. But stepping back with intention. To stay focused. To block out noise. To ensure every step forward comes from conviction, not external pressure. The Stoics lived by this principle. Speak less. Embody more. Don't explain your philosophy. Live it. This becomes especially vital when you're detaching from toxic dynamics. Because in those early days of healing, the urge to explain yourself, to announce your peace, to prove you've changed, it's strong. But here's the danger. Early change is fragile. And when you're still learning to stand in your new identity, performing it for others can destabilize you. If they test you, and you slip back into an old pattern, the doubt creeps in. And it's not just their doubt. It's yours. That self-doubt. It breaks momentum. That's why real transformation must be protected. Not hidden out of shame, but guarded out of respect for the process. Because your brain doesn't respond to declarations. It responds to repetition. Every time you walk away from drama. Every time you choose silence over reaction. Every time you stay grounded in your routine instead of chasing chaos. You're reinforcing the shift. You're wiring yourself for peace. For presence. For power. And that kind of transformation. No argument, no explanation. Can replicate it. Toxic people thrive in one particular space. The gap between what you say, and what you do. You might say you've changed. But if you still entertain the chaos, still engage their bait, still react the same way. They know nothing's different. And their leverage? It remains. But when your behavior becomes unshakably aligned. When you stop flinching at their emotional hooks. Stop reacting to their subtle jabs. Stop trying to prove you've grown. They lose access. Because you can't manipulate someone who doesn't flinch. You can't twist a boundary that isn't spoken, but lived. Over time, your life begins to filter itself. Those who were drawn to the unstable version of you. They lose interest. There's no drama left to feed on. No chaos to stir. No emotional fuel to burn. But something else starts to happen. The grounded people. The disciplined ones. The quiet builders. They notice something else. They feel the presence. The steadiness. The absence of noise. And they trust it. Because true maturity isn't loud. It doesn't seek credit. It builds, slowly, consistently. In silence. In rhythm. In truth. The Stoics knew this deeply. Peace doesn't need to be announced. It arrives as a byproduct of integrity. Of living so closely aligned with your values. That even your silence carries weight. You don't rise by convincing people you've changed. You rise by becoming so consistent that change is no longer questioned. It's undeniable. And when that moment arrives, you don't have to defend it. You don't have to explain your absence to people who once drained your soul. Your life answers every question they never deserved to ask. So now ask yourself. Where in your life are you still explaining, instead of embodying? What parts of your growth are still waiting for you to quietly commit? Without apology. Without performance. Without validation. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about it. Because real growth. It doesn't beg to be noticed. It stands in silence. Anchored in discipline. And felt deeply by those who are actually paying attention. As Marcus Aurelius wrote. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. Let your results speak. Let your peace echo. Let the quiet strength of your presence say everything that words never could. 9. Master yourself, and the world bows quietly. There comes a moment. When you finally realize the real battle isn't out there. It's not with those who misunderstand you. Not with the ones who provoke you. Not even with the systems that frustrate you. The real fight is with yourself. With the part of you that still reacts. Still explains. Still entertains what you should have released long ago. That's where the Stoic concept of coherence becomes everything. Coherence isn't about being perfect. It's not about achieving some spiritual high ground. It's about alignment. A grounded inner state. Where your thoughts, your emotions, and your actions stop pulling in opposite directions. And start moving as one. And in that alignment, something powerful happens. You stop chasing peace. You start becoming it. Most people live fragmented. They say one thing. Feel another. and do something entirely different. That disconnection. When what you say, feel, and do don't line up. It doesn't just create stress and anxiety within you. It ripples outward. People feel it. Your energy becomes unpredictable. Your presence, inconsistent. Your decisions, shaky. But the moment you begin closing that gap, when you start choosing stillness over reactivity, discipline over impulse, your nervous system begins to settle. Your energy stops scattering. You come back to yourself. And in that settling, clarity returns. You begin to feel it, in small, almost imperceptible ways. You wake up a little less exhausted. You notice your triggers don't hit the same. Conversations that once hijacked your emotions now pass through you like wind, without knocking you over. Think of someone who spent years shape-shifting to keep the peace. Walking on eggshells. Reading every room. Filtering every word to avoid conflict. That life? It's not just exhausting. It fractures the self. And for a long time, they believe this is just how life is. But the moment they begin choosing differently, choosing not to over-explain, not to overextend, not to break their own values for someone else's comfort, something shifts. Not on the outside, but inside. And that shift, it doesn't shout. It doesn't post. It builds. Through boundaries that are honored. Through routines that are kept. Through thoughts that are questioned, not blindly obeyed. And as that inner coherence grows stronger, the world begins to adjust. The people who once fed on their instability, they lose access. The manipulators, they can't find a grip. The emotional chaos, it stops landing. Because there's nothing left in you that matches it. As the Stoics taught, harmony doesn't come from controlling the world. It comes from mastering the self. And once that mastery starts to take root, the external world quietly begins to mirror that order. What doesn't align fades. Not because you pushed it out, but because it simply can't stay. You don't have to prove anything. You just have to stop feeding what's been draining you. As Epictetus said, no man is free who is not master of himself. And once you reach that place, peace is no longer something you search for. It's something you carry. The truth is, you don't have to fight. You don't have to chase. You don't even have to convince anyone to leave you alone. You don't have to fight them. You don't have to convince them. You only have to become someone who no longer feeds their chaos. When you shift your energy inward. When you master your nervous system. Choose clarity over reaction. And move in quiet, steady alignment. Something profound happens. Toxic people lose their grip. Not because you push them out. But because, there's nothing in you left to respond. You've changed the frequency. You've changed the channel. And they can't tune in anymore. This isn't about becoming cold. It's about becoming unshakable. And that kind of strength? It's not built in loud victories. It's earned. In silence. In discipline. In those still, quiet moments where you choose peace over your old patterns. So if this message stirred something in you, if you're ready to stop explaining yourself, stop bleeding energy into chaos, and start living from your center, then like this video, share it, and subscribe. Because this channel, it's not for performers. It's for people who are finally done pretending. And fully ready to evolve. You are not alone. And once you commit to this path, you'll discover something powerful. You don't have to force anyone to leave. You don't have to cut them out with noise. They'll walk away on their own. Because the version of you they depended on, the version they manipulated, the version that once bent to survive, no longer exists. And that's exactly how it should be.